My presentation is slightly different. It's really coming from a perspective of questions. So the Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company is about 7 years old. It is a public-private partnership with the government of Trinidad and Tobago to rehabilitate Trinidad's cocoa sector. We have been working on looking at collective marks and a possible GI for our cocoa in Trinidad, but that is very much in the process. So it feels that we're a step behind the interesting presentation we just had on the pepper. I feel that we're now coming into that process. I should say that one of the key things I found quite interesting about the presentation just now is that one of our main products that we make in Trinidad is in fact a scorpion pepper chocolate, which is one of the most popular products that we sell in Trinidad. But the Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company has a cocoa processing facility in the center of Trinidad and a shop which is located at the Hilton in Trinidad. It produces a range of products, both in terms of industrial products for industry processes. We produce culinary products for chefs, and then finished chocolate products. And so for us, one of the things is really looking at how is this used as an ingredient, both from an industrial perspective, a culinary perspective, but also in finished goods. We have been working with our intellectual property office in Trinidad, a very, very good partner indeed, who have been involved with our trademark, our industrial design. One of the image you see there of our steel pan tin was actually just confirmed protected last week. And so for us, we're very keen on our intellectual property. But really, when you look at cocoa from Trinidad, which has been over 400 years, effectively been on the island of Trinidad, and 250 years of this unique variety of Trinitario cocoa, one of the key characteristics of our cocoa is our flavor profile. So fruity floral is the flavor characteristic of all of our over 100 variety of cocoa has this characteristic. So a bit like the pepper and very much like the tequila, it has these characteristics which you want to protect and communicate. In our processing facility, we produce a range of products: cocoa nibs, which is effectively the roasted bean, which is shelled; cocoa mass, which is pure cacao grounded down into a paste; couverture, which is basically what chefs use for producing cakes and pastries and chocolates; finished chocolate products; and then cocoa butter and powder. So really, some of these ingredients we work with partners, and we're just going to go through some of the case studies. And really, my presentation is asking questions. And I think Francesca sort of covered some of the answers, but we can probably discuss that a little bit later. One of the products that we work with, Angostura Distillers, we have developed a partnership with our National Cocoa Board, and there they have a certificate, as you could see on the presentation slide. Now, this I know is protected by the TT Intellectual Property Office, and what this says is that everything that is from Trinidad has this mark, which comes through the Cocoa Development Company of Trinidad and Tobago. And if you look on the left on the slide, you will see that at the top, on the neck of the bottle, you will see that that's where the mark is presented. So really what we're saying from this product, which was launched a year ago and shipped all over the world, this product is genuinely from Trinidad. So it's quite straightforward and quite clear cut. And a bit like how Jose was saying with the tequila, what we do is get a certificate of origin for our Trinidad cocoa. So we can prove what was purchased from the cocoa board, what is the origin of that cocoa in terms of its region and its characteristics. So this is example one. What would 100% use of Trinitario look like? And as you can see, it's specifically cocoa bitters. But here it's used as a flavor ingredient into a finished product. The example two is really around using it again for its fruity floral flavor. On the left, we have a chocolate stout, a bit like a chocolate Guinness, as it were, which was produced in a brewery in the UK, and that uses 100% of Trinitario cocoa, like the cocoa bitters. On the right, we have a locally made stout, which was a short production run, which I believe is going to be made again this year by a brewery in Trinidad, but we used only 10% approximately of the chocolate, of all the chocolate being used, of local Trinitario cocoa. So here we have this slightly sort of mixture of different cocoa from other origins being blended in versus an origin product. But where it becomes interesting is when you start claiming origin. And so for us, one of the things that we were very sensitive about these sorts of projects is that we want to be very clear that there is no misleading consumers about when we say Trinitario or Trinidad Trinitario, what that actually means. Subsequently, you'll see these two examples. One set on the left, which was on social media for a short period, but actually was incorrect compared to the one on the right. So at what point can you use origin? And I appreciate this is not a GI specific example, as it's not a GI, but at what point can we use this example as something that we can say the sufficient blend between claims of a partial blend or full Trinidad Trinitario? So this is an example of sort of confusing messages, as it were. One of our project partners, what we have in Trinidad, is also another local chocolate company that we are working with. And again, they've taken the route of using other GI brands. And here's an example of a product they launched. And in this context, it wasn't clear to me what would be the time when you could be allowed to use your license on packaging. So it's not clear as to how much coffee is used, but here, as you can see on the packaging, that Jamaican Blue Mountain has given the approval of the licensing to use that. So again, it's really another question, and I'm slightly hoping that some of the IP team or Francesca might be able to shed light on when is this suitable to use a license certificate on your packaging or labels. And indeed, if you're using it, is there a minimum percentages before you use it, or is there some sort of process which you undergo to not to devalue, which was something that also Jose said, you don't want to devalue your product by simply diluting it to your brand by diluting it in products that it does not have credibility. So that's another example. One of the things that we have done with Nestle in Trinidad is to explore something similar using local cocoa powder. So we came up with our own label. And this is something that we had discussed with them and is an ongoing discussion as possibly a collective mark. So again, it's about trying to communicate to the consumer that what they have is genuine and of origin, but sometimes that doesn't always come across terribly well. Another question I really had, which was quite an interesting one, is where do you find the balance? Assuming that Trinidad Trinitario one day does become a GI, we have a project at the moment to look at the use of our cocoa shells. This is important because some of our cocoa is most expensive in the world. So 20% of your product is in these shells, which is effectively waste. However, it does have a lot of fruity floral characteristics in them. And one of the things we're doing is to infuse that into rum. Now, Jose, I thought presentation was very fascinating about how you look at origin and where we look at GI, and we're working with both rum producers in Trinidad and in Barbados about this particular product. But if you do have a GI like Trinitario cocoa, can the shells themselves as a product, as an ingredient, be used in something like this and convey a Trinidad GI origin on a label on a product like rum. So again, this is a sort of a byproduct for us, but essentially it's really conveying, is there a unique storytelling to be had about a cocoa shell rum and how that would be presented. And finally, the example, and this was touched on with Francesca's presentation, that when we look at our culinary chocolate, if you presented 100% Trinidad Trinitario, a lot of chefs would come back to us and say, actually, it's very rich, it's very strong. Your fruity floral characteristics are almost too strong. Can we blend it with other characteristics? And so we've developed a blend using cacao from Colombia, for example. And in this blend, there's a discussion around what percentage. And I appreciate in Francesca's presentation, it said 50%. However, if you presented a 50% couverture to a chef, that might be too strong. So at what point do we look at these blends and conveying and protecting the Trinidad Trinitario, but also these things about presenting something unique to the audience that doesn't mislead the customer or consumer about the origin of the product? So for us, would a 30% blend still allow us to say unique Trinidad Trinitario? Again, I think that's something that we will come back to in our discussions. So really, my presentation is more about more questions than answers. It's showcasing a number of points that I wondered whether we could use it as a springboard for discussion, but really to thank you, the previous presenters, as I see from, being a lot further ahead from where we are in cocoa. What I do think is similar, whether it's tequila or the pepper, is that really you're protecting that brand, but that experience and that flavor is a strong message. And for us in our cocoa, both in Trinidad and regionally in the Caribbean, you'll find that fine flavor cocoa is becoming more and more prominent. So this means that other places you will see that it is being used for its flavor. And this is where we need to focus our attention in protecting that. So in that regard, I'd just like to conclude there